There is only one way that I can see Oregon getting threatened by Northwestern.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Grading the offensive and defensive coordinators. That will happen on today's show. The running back room, some thoughts there. Dante for Heisman? I mean, through two games, kind of looks that way, right? This episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Yes, my eyes are very red. Hold on a moment. The flag wasn't straight. The flag can't not be straight. Anyway, I'm now seeing as I sit down to record this show, my eyes are very red. I'm battling a cold today, but guess what? We have to talk about Northwestern. There's no time to wallow in self-pity and a little bit of a cold because Northwestern is on tap. The one way I mentioned that Oregon gets challenged by the Wildcats is if Oregon just decides not to show up mentally. That's it. That is the only way. There is nothing on paper that says this game should be even remotely close when you consider Northwestern's team, their program, and how Oregon has played in the first couple of games. There's nothing to indicate that it could be close. That does not mean Oregon is incapable of playing a bad half of football. They have played 4 really good halves so far this year. I imagine by the end of the season, we won't be saying Oregon played 24 great halves of football. A dud is coming somewhere at some point. I just don't know how it would happen in this game. Maybe it would be the 9 a.m. Pacific time kickoff. Maybe it would be playing in a small stadium that looks beautiful, by the way. It's a temporary deal, but man, it's right on Lake Michigan. It looks cool. The inflatable duck is reportedly doubtful for the game. That's disappointing. That's really disappointing. But the Wildcats on paper, which thankfully, because it wouldn't be as much fun and it would be far too predictable, is not where games are played, does not have the ability to challenge Oregon here. So, the last 3 high school classes that Northwestern has brought in, and they haven't exactly crushed it in the transfer portal either to build up their roster, their last 3 classes have averaged 65th nationally. So the amount of composite talent that is going to be on the field for the Ducks outweighs that of Northwestern by a sizable amount. Now, the interesting thing is that David Braun, I actually think, can be a pretty good coach. I just think Northwestern's a really, really difficult place to try and build a program today. And he took over as the interim head coach in 2023 when they moved on from their previous head coach, Pat Fitzgerald, because of an off-field incident. And then all of a sudden, David Braun was the full-time coach because he had won the Big Ten Coach of the Year in 2023. When 8-5, Northwestern was off a 1-11 season, and David Braun found a way to go 8-5. Now, since then, it appears to be trending in the wrong direction for the Wildcats. So last year, they went 4-8 in that 23 season, by the way. You remember that Utah team that Oregon beat 35-6 when College Game Day was there in Salt Lake City? Northwestern beat them in the Las Vegas Bowl that year. 14-7, I believe, was the final score. They took a step back a season ago. They went 4-8. The quarterback room was a complete and total mess. So far this season, they're 1-1. They're coming off a 42-7 win last time out against Western Illinois, who is one of the worst FCS programs in all of college football over the last several years. Their first game of the year is really the indicator of why this should not be a close competitive game if Oregon shows up and plays the way they're capable of. They went to Tulane, who is one of the premier Group of 5 teams in all of college football this year. Admittedly, they have a legitimate shot to make the college football playoff. Still, they are in the American Conference. They went on the road, Northwestern did, got beat 23-3. They put up 3 points. Their quarterback, Preston Stone, threw 4 interceptions in the game. Tulane, with a quarterback who transferred from BYU a couple of weeks ago, as in, I think it was around a month ago, roughly, that he actually arrived to Tulane's campus, ran for 269 yards. Oregon is averaging about 280 so far per game this year. They have 3 different guys that are averaging, that are running backs, that are averaging over 11 yards a carry. And then you have De'Corian Moore at 14 and Luke Moga at 23.5. I'll talk more about the running backs later in today's show. Shall I continue? Indeed I shall, because that's the purpose of this segment. Get to know the Wildcats a little bit. Oklahoma State last week, I think, was a bigger measuring stick than Montana State, even though Montana State is a premier FCS team. I think this is about the same level of opponent in Northwestern. It's just that it's a road game, and it's going to be an early kickoff time. I saw a quote going around that I think it was Brandon Finney said the defensive backs have been waking up at like 4 or 5 in the morning to get adjusted to, what their body clocks will be waking up at come game day. Like, that will be different, and maybe the first quarter is sluggish for that reason. But all those factors aside, weird stadium, playing on the water is actually legitimately really, really cool. But small stadium, early kickoff time, decently long trip. Yeah, those things can be tough. It shouldn't matter. It just should not matter. As long as Oregon goes out and doesn't give Northwestern a bunch of things like turnovers or miscues on offense to slow themselves down and take themselves out of scoring position, then I don't think Oregon's going to have a problem getting up and down the field. I don't think Oregon's going to have a problem preventing Northwestern from going up and down the field. So Northwestern brought in a quarterback this offseason, Preston Stone, who college football fans out there might remember from his time at SMU. 2 years ago, he was actually pretty good. He completed 60% of his throws, and they were in the American Conference at the time, which is a really good Group of 5 league. He threw for almost 3,200 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Now, SMU moved on from him, which I found to be strange, talking about him over on Locked On College Football. And now I understand why they decided to do that. Kevin Jennings is a better player. And I don't think Preston Stone has as much help around him at Northwestern as he had previously at SMU. But so far through 2 games this year, he has been sacked 4 times. That's not great when you haven't played a Power 4 opponent. Like, Oregon is by far the best team Northwestern has played so far. And Preston Stone is throwing for 203 yards a game, 61.5% completion, 3 touchdowns against 4 interceptions. All 4 of those interceptions came against Tulane. To make matters even worse for Northwestern, their leading rusher and one of the most experienced players in all of college football, who's the same class as Gary Bryant, Cam Porter, got injured last week against the Leathernecks. That's Western Illinois' mascot, and he's out for the season. He had been averaging 7.5 yards a carry through the first couple of games, and he's no longer there. Their top receiver is Griffin Wild, transfer from South Dakota State, wasn't a super highly rated guy in the portal, was really productive with the Jackrabbits last year. Almost 1,200 yards, or not quite, I suppose, 1,147, but in that ballpark on 70 receptions for 12 touchdowns. So far this year, he hasn't exactly exploded statistically. That's the guy that Oregon's secondary is likely going to be keying in on, but this feels a lot like the Oklahoma State game to me. It really does. You've got a quarterback that, based on recent history, should be overmatched against this Oregon defense. You have got a roster that should allow Oregon to, not that they're, wanting it to happen necessarily, but should allow Oregon the opportunity to run the ball for chunk plays. And when you do that, the play action can be really lethal. And I just don't know how Northwestern keeps this close other than Oregon making mistakes. That's the biggest thing. If Oregon plays as they did the last couple of weeks, Northwestern, simply put, does not have the talent to keep up. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, expectations, questions, all of that good stuff. But that's a glance at the Wildcats. Unfortunately, they just haven't been a really strong program the last couple of years, and we should, come Saturday when the game ends, and I'll be going live on this channel on YouTube after the game. I should be in a pretty good mood. You should be in a pretty good mood, and Oregon should be coming off a pretty comfortable win. So let me know your thoughts for all of that. Let's grade the coordinators, just for fun. First, this episode brought to you by DoorDash. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. So let's break it down and start with Dante Moore. He just continues to be awesome. He should in this game as well. He shouldn't have to do a ton in this game, quite frankly, because the Ducks should be able to run the ball virtually at will. And Noah Whittington has just 14 carries on the year, which is insane because he's racked up 159 yards already. Those guys have been delivering for the Ducks, and DoorDash can deliver for you on your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every time you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply, promo period through November 18th. Check out DoorDash today. Today of all days, gotta have my second segment sip. I'm knocking my chapstick on the floor. I hope this show comes off all right. Anyway, let's get to some questions here. This one from a Locked On Ducks insider. You get priority mailbag access, bunch of other perks as well. Link in the description below for a free 14-day trial. Says, hey Spencer, question for you. After 2 games, who do you think has made more growth from the Rose Bowl, Will Stein or Tosh Lupoi? At first, I was thinking Will Stein because he's working with a new O-line, quarterback, and receivers. But going back and rewatching the games, I think Tosh has made more growth. He replaced just as much on defense, and the game is geared to favor offense. The defense has been great at all levels and has had almost no drop-off when guys are constantly rotating in and out. Feels, even for how much both squads lost from last season, but only allowing 16 points in the first 2 games is more impressive to me than scoring the way we have. Just through 2 games. Only you give both of these guys A- to A grades through the first 2 games. What more could you possibly look for, frankly? I mean, you know, Oregon punted that one time. I think they punted twice, landing at a funny quote after the Oklahoma State game that if they didn't punt, he was worried they were going to lose a punter to the portal. So, I mean, you got to work on that stuff at some point. You're going to punt and when you face, you know, actual teams that are capable of challenging you. But just through 2 games, which is a small sample size, but not nothing, certainly more than the months of off-season speculation we've had and last season's games so far, I'd actually say Will Stein. You know, Oregon's offense came out pretty poorly against Ohio State. And not that the defense came out guns blazing. They were really, really bad. Like, really, really bad. But in some respects, I think that was more personnel driven in a couple of spots. Whereas that Oregon offense last year, when you don't get off to the proper start or play the way that you should, it's because your scheme is not good enough. It's because your game plan is getting countered and you're not making the proper adjustments, because Oregon didn't have a personnel problem on offense last year. For the most part, they didn't have one on defense, but there were a couple of spots, most notably safety, that, you know, I said going into the game, yeah, Oregon's not good enough here, and Ohio State went after them right away. Now, neither coordinator was good. They both get, if I were to give individual grades for those games, it'd probably be close to an F for both of them. I think, I mean, I don't think either one would be higher than a D. You know, Oregon gave up 41 points. Yeah, it's close to an F for that particular game. But through the first 2 games, yeah, A- is the worst grade you could give these guys. But I think they both get A's, quite frankly, because, you know, the playmaking on both sides early in games shows that the guys have been ready to go. The game plan has been good. They've made good adjustments throughout the game. I'd actually say Will Stein would get the higher grade for me. I'd give him an A and Tosh an A- so far. And, I mean, well, frankly, it might be Will Stein is an A+ and Tosh is an A through the first couple of games. So, yeah, that's a better way to look at it, because offenses typically are not as far advanced as defenses early in the season. It is harder to get your offense clicking right away than it is on defense, because there's just a lot more that goes into every play call. You know, a defensive play call is, hey, here are your keys, here's your assignment and whatnot, but then you're reacting to the play, whereas the offense is actually executing the play. You know, Tosh Lupoi sending in a Tampa 2 coverage call is not as complex as Oregon installing, the under center, what would it be, 27 fake stretch counter around, or whatever the play call actually is, where they lined up Decorian in the backfield and flipped Dier Hill. Like, that requires a lot more, and that's why offenses have been, first week of college football, I think the unders bet nationally, I think they covered it like a 64% clip. It was at least 60%. And that's usually because early in the season, offenses need more time to gel. But, Will Stein's working with a new quarterback. Tosh Lupoi still has Bryce Betcher there. He's got a veteran on the back end in Dylan Thieneman, who's new but has played a lot of college football. Yeah, I'd say Will Stein has been more impressive so far. But through the first 2 games, you can't majorly argue with what they've done so far. And we'll see what happens this weekend against Northwestern, because as I mentioned earlier, this is not a game that should provide much of a challenge. As long as they get past the external circumstances, they should be perfectly fine. And they have so much depth as well. Like, I think they really, really should be fine. Speaking of Will Stein, Jacob sends this question in. Been seeing a lot of talk from Florida fans about them getting Lanning if Napier gets fired. Yeah, okay, no. Obviously, that won't happen. That is correct. He has turned down Auburn, Texas A&M. He turned down Alabama, okay? He's not letting him stick around. The one thing I think could be a possibility is Will Stein getting a call from them. What do you think the chances are of him leaving to the Gators if Napier's out by the end of the season? Billy Napier should have been fired last year. I said that over on Locked On College Football, and then they lost to South Florida at home. Dude is not cut out for that particular job. Stein doesn't have any ties to the SEC or the Florida area. He went to Louisville. He's coached in Texas. He was at UTSA. Now he's at Oregon. So it would be an outside, like on Spencer's scale of agreement, my concern of Will Stein getting the Florida job if it comes open can't be higher than a 3, because Florida just went through, and not every athletic administration thinks this way, they just went through bringing in a guy who's not, from the SEC or hasn't coached in the SEC and Billy Napier. I don't think they would do that again. As good as Will Stein is, I really don't think they would do that again. And I've never seen this get seriously suggested anywhere. If Oregon's offense keeps looking like this, the likelihood that Will Stein is in his final year as OC for the Ducks just goes up and up. Because, if he does this with a third quarterback in 3 years where it's over 70% completion and explosive offensive numbers throughout the course of the year and winning a bunch of games, like he's going to get phone calls. I don't think Florida would be that sort of job. If I were Will Stein, I'd be interested in the Florida job. I think his interest would be a 9.5 out of 10. That's a heck of a job. That's a top 5 job in all of college football because of the location and the history there. But would Florida be interested in Will Stein? I'm not so sure. He's doing such a good job with Dante Moore. Could the Heisman really happen this year? Let's talk about it. First, this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every model. I'm a huge details kind of guy. When I'm out on the golf course, as I was earlier today, perhaps foolishly, because it probably didn't make my cold any better, I am all about the details. In my swing, in my shots, everything I'm doing is detail-oriented. That's why I can appreciate the way a Mazda is made. All-wheel drive, standard in every crossover SUV. You can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like Oregon players, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you need to make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. This episode also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season's here. College football is, of course, here, and Oregon's a massive favorite this week against Northwestern. 28.5 points on the road. I have a hard time not picking Oregon to cover at this point. With the way they've looked in the last couple of games, it's a lot of points. It is on the road. I just don't know how Northwestern is scoring consistently. I don't know how Oregon is getting stopped consistently. Northwestern's been a prideful defensive program over the last couple of years, and that's certainly their stronger side of the ball. But all in all, I think Oregon's rolling here. If you feel the same way, FanDuel's the place to go. New customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So if you want to spice up the Oregon game or any other college football game or any NFL game, then FanDuel is the place to go. If you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Check them out at FanDuel.com. All right, I want to touch on the Oregon running back situation as well, because there's a really interesting stat that most of you probably don't know. Just because you wouldn't think about it, it did surprise me a little bit as well. Before I get to that, this question from a Locked On Ducks insider: does Oregon's dominance hurt Dante Moore's chances at a Heisman? He's played close to flawless so far, but he's only 6th on the Heisman watch. I can see him being pulled early multiple times this year, including this Saturday, by the way, which means his stats will be lower than other quarterbacks who are left in the whole game. If you're talking about winning the Heisman Trophy, yes. If you're talking about being a Heisman finalist, no, not necessarily. Because last year, Dillon Gabriel's stats weren't it wasn't a crazy, insane season. He just was the starting quarterback who was really good for the Big Ten champions who were 13-0 and the number 1 seed in the playoff. That's why Dillon Gabriel went to New York as a Heisman finalist. He didn't have insane stats, but if you're talking about actually winning the award this year, yeah, it's he wound up going for 3,857 yards, 30 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and he went for 300 or so ish in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State. So, yeah, you look at other Heisman winners. Bo Nix went for 4,500 yards. Obviously didn't win the award. Would have if they'd won the Pac-12 championship. Jaden Daniels total over 5,000 yards. Mariota had over 5,000 yards in his Heisman season. Bryce Young, I think, threw for over 5,000 yards. Joe Burrow went for 6,000 yards. Those numbers, yeah, Dante's not going to get those. And I'm going to give you the Stephen A. Smith line here. We don't care. Would it be cool for another Oregon player to win the Heisman? Obviously. It'd be great. It'd be really exciting. It'd be really fun. Does anybody care about that? You know why Jaden Daniels won the Heisman in 2023? Because LSU wasn't good enough to have anything else to celebrate that year. I'd rather Dante be healthy, come out of games, and win, and not win anything close to the Heisman, and Oregon go win a national title. So yeah, it definitely hurts. There's no doubt about it. But does it mean he can't be a finalist? No, I don't think so. Okay, couple running back questions here. This from Tyler. Do you think when the season's over, Oregon will look back and wish they gave the ball to Dare Hill more? I know the Ducks are rotating a lot of backs right now, and they have a ton of talented players that also deserve to get the ball. In my opinion, just based on eye test, Dier's the second most explosive player with the ball in his hands to Decory and more on this team. I've taken into consideration that Dier is a true freshman and mostly lines up in the slot for jet sweeps. What say you? I'm not going to be surprised if, as the season goes on, Dare Hill continues to be a part of the offense and Jay Harris and Makhi Hughes fade to the background with Jordan Davison. I wouldn't be surprised at that whatsoever. Now, I was definitely surprised just because he had a lot of cachet coming over in the offseason. Makhi Hughes is as far down on the list as he is. But something that Will Stein has said is, boy, we didn't fully realize how good these young guys are going to be. And I knew those were talented dudes. I've just looked at them and thought, yeah, they're true freshmen. That's, going to be tougher to play. But as Dan Lanning always says, and I've always pushed back on this notion, Dan Lanning doesn't play true freshmen. Like, no, they've played every single year he's been here. If you're good enough, you're old enough, is what Lanning always says. Dare Hill, goodness gracious. Doing shows with a cold is so annoying. Anyway, Dare Hill is really good. Really, really good. And I agree with you that his explosiveness, which was the defining characteristic of his tape, he and Jordan Davison coming out of high school, when I talked about him on the show, and other people made this observation as well, they're seen as thunder and lightning. because Davison is the hammer, the heavy hitter, and D'Air Hill is the home run hitter kind of guy. That's what they look like. I mean, they look that way perhaps quicker than we thought, but I mean, they look really, really good. Now, here's the interesting thing. Think about this as you're listening to or watching the show. Noah Whittington has 14 carries in 2 games for 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's 11.4 yards a carry. Which player has the second most carries on the team through 2 games? Did you know that it's Makhi Hughes? Doesn't feel that way, because of all the running backs, he actually has the lowest yards per carry of anybody except for Jay Harris. Everybody else that's a running back is above him. And so Hughes being the, number 5 guy, really 5 or 6, I think is a good spot for Oregon to be in. It's not that Makhi Hughes isn't capable of being good. I think he is. It's just that when you watch the other guys, I kind of agree with, the energy that Tyler was bringing with this question. Like, when you watch D'Air Hill, yeah, they have different skill sets, so they're used in different situations to be sure. But, I mean, how does D'Air Hill's role go away? Why would it go away? I don't think it really needs to. If he's your gadget fly sweep guy, okay, great. And then if, in the next year or two, he eventually evolves into a more complete back that can be a workhorse and take 15 to 20 carries a game, great. But if he just winds up being a guy who you're trying to create explosive plays with, every offense has those sorts of dudes. And so that's not Makhi Hughes' game. And so throughout the year, I'm definitely thinking that D'Air Hill has a better chance to have a consistent role in the Oregon offense, more so than Makhi Hughes. That's not to say Hughes couldn't work his way up the depth chart. Jade Lamar has looked pretty darn good. Jay Harris has done some really good things as well. Could he move past those guys? I think so. I think it's pretty clear at this point you can't get past Whittington. Holy smokes. He just looks like a rejuvenated and revitalized guy. And, he has always had the home run speed. Sorry, I had to do a quick cut here on YouTube to blow my nose. But anyway, so, I don't think they're going to look back and say, should have given him the ball more. I don't see how he stops getting the ball, quite frankly. Same vein, MBB311 says, I'd like to see D'Air Hill and Davison overtake Jane Lamar in the depth chart come November. I think those two offer more in every department except experience, but I was not impressed with Lamar's long speed. That being said, I'm not sure where to place my expectations for Makhi Hughes at this point, but I feel confident trusting the staff. How do you think this RB room will evolve through our 3-part season, Spencer? Talked about that 3-part season. Lanning's mentioned it as well. It's 5 games bye, and then I think 3 games bye. Let me pull that up real quick just so so bye week of October 4th, and then play 3 games, and then a bye, and then 4 games, and that's how you get to 12. So, yeah, I think throughout the year, it's going to condense at least a little. I don't know how much, but, right now, the carry distribution is 14 for Whittington, 9 for Lamar, 6 for Hill, 10 for Hughes, 9 for Davison, 8 for Harris, and 5 for Riggs. Yeah, Harris, Davison, Riggs, I can see him getting pushed down a bit, but Davison can be that goal line specialist sort of guy. And D'Air Hill could be someone that is the gadget sort of guy. And Makhi Hughes might not have a consistent role, but what if Noah Whittington goes down for an injury? Who do you trust to be your number one workhorse back? You going with Jane Lamar? Could. Guy's done some really good things this year. It doesn't look as dynamic and explosive when Jade Lamar makes a big play as it does when Whittington or especially D'Air Hill does. Like, I understand where you're coming from with that. I think that of all the running backs in the room, consistently at some level, and the touches are going to fluctuate or condense down a bit, and a couple guys will fall back a little. I think you're just going to see 4 guys throughout the year. I think D'Air Hill is going to be in a gadget role, and And then I think you're just going to see at least 3 running backs consistently get carries throughout the season. So interested to see how they do it this week against Northwestern. If you have more questions about the Wildcats, drop them in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. Thank you for putting up with me. And as I battle a cold, hopefully it's better on tomorrow's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.